Welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 8, Episode 14, presented by Salonis. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
On this episode, our second of three interviews from the Bamboozer podcast studio at Shop Talk in Vegas is Melanie Babcock Brown, Vice President of Home Depot's Orange Apron Media and Monetization. Now, we've had analysts talking about retail media on the pod going back to Lauren Wiener from BCG in mid-22 and Andrew Lipsman as well later the same year, but we wanted to talk with an operator, a retailer, about their perspectives on running a media business inside a retailer.
Well, it's hard to imagine a hotter topic other than, I guess, AI when it comes to what we hear at retail conferences and in the media. And yeah, I think it's great to actually get somebody who's at the leading edge of what's going on. But as you say, someone who is living it every day inside an actual retailer.
Now, something different about our interview with Melanie, her title, in fact, the entire division name and structure was on the cusp of changing. So it actually, that wasn't actually the title or division when we interviewed her in our studio. Therein lies a tale. So we got her back on the mic. We did a double-click follow-up flash interview with Melanie in our Atlanta offices last week, touch base after the big launch and up front that she hosted, and we heard how it went and what the feedback was. So it's a real treat to get both perspectives after a very, very busy couple of weeks for Melanie. Now, speaking of busy couple of weeks, you got a couple of busy weeks. You're off to Paris for the World Retail Congress. So do say hi for me to all the wonderful people there and the folks that we had a chance to interview. And then we've got the virtual book launch for Leaders Leap on the 22nd. And then I am in Dallas with you at SMU. Any of the listeners happen to be in Dallas on the 24th. So it's pretty busy. And you know, I get to go to Dallas and we get to hang for a while. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm not going to be settled at home very much. Just got back from spending several days up in Canada. And then, yes, by the time this comes out, I will be firmly ensconced in Paris. And then, yeah, a bunch of running around once I get back. I'm going to be in London for a few days. So anybody who's any of those places wants to reach out and get together, let me know. But yeah, it's kind of a whirlwind few weeks here with the book coming out.
All right, well, let's get to the news of the week, and let's start where we must, where we should, and that is the release of the shareholder letter from Amazon, because we get a glimpse into a very interesting and a very complicated business, but also is a bit of a bellwether for the broader economy, not just retailers. So let's talk about your observations from Andy Jassy's letter.
Yeah, I think as long as we've been doing the podcast, this is, I don't know, the third or fourth letter that would have come out originally from Jeff Bezos, who started doing these really towards the beginning of Amazon's life. Now Andy Jassy has been doing them from, I guess this is his second one maybe. But yeah, they're really interesting to read. We can put a link in the show notes, but I would encourage people to go read them. It's pretty extensive. You know, usually it's like 15 or 20 pages. I don't know that I noticed exactly how long this one was, but goes into quite a lot of detail about the macro environment, but more specifically, the many, many pieces of the Amazon flywheel. So just a couple of things I was going to mention that I found interesting. One, which of course we knew already, is that Amazon has continued to have strong revenue growth. So they were up for the year 12%, which, you know, for a big company is pretty solid revenue growth.
12% on many, many billions. So that's not nothing, that's for sure.
Yes, that's a huge, huge number. Of course, again, something we've referenced throughout the years we've gotten quarterly results is that the ad business, which is already quite substantial, and I guess we can tie this a little bit to what we talk about with Melanie, but the media part of Amazon up 24%. But overall, very, very dramatic profit improvements. So many of the efforts that we saw in terms of pulling back on some investments and eliminating costs and shutting down some distribution, all those kinds of things really, really paying off for the year. He also talked about how extensive their offering is on the retail side, that they add tens of millions of products last year alone, on top of obviously an already vast assortment. Highlighted in particular, because this has been an area that Amazon's been underdeveloped in for a while, the addition of some premium brands. So brands like Coach, Victoria's Secret, Pit Viper, Martha Stewart, Clinique, Lancome, and Urban Decay are now on the site where they weren't a year ago. So that's kind of an interesting movement to try to get into that more upscale fashion kind of space.
What do you think of that from the brand's perspective? You know, the Clinique, the Lancome, the Prestige Beauty have been pretty skittish about going on to Amazon. So I thought that was interesting. Is that growth flatlining and they need to you eventually say uncle and go on to the biggest retailer? What do you make of that?
It probably depends on the particular brand situation. I would say there are definitely elements of perhaps a little bit of desperation we see sometimes when brands decide to do that. Sometimes it's just like the acceptance of, well, this is a huge distribution channel, and if we're not there,
kind of thing.
maybe we're shooting ourselves in the foot. In many cases, I think it's definitely the case with Victoria's Secret, the offering tends to be quite edited. So that's how they're kind of balancing the brand management part of it, as well as, well, this isn't true in Victoria's Secret's case, but it would be true in Coach's case where they've got distribution partners. So as you would know, a lot of times it's like, well, your department store customers or whatever are going to be like, what are you doing selling on Amazon? That really hurts our business. So I think there's a million different stories in the city, but I think a lot of
in the near naked city when it comes to Victoria's Secret.
Well, when you get to Amazon's whatever they are trending towards close to 7% of all retail, they're 40+% of all e-commerce. It's just kind of hard to ignore, just like we saw with the warehouse clubs, 20, 30 years ago. So a couple other things quickly he talked about was, and this is also just kind of mind-boggling when you think about how good Amazon has been already in speed of delivery. They've increased the speed of delivery. They've been putting distribution centers closer to the customers. So the percent of same day and first day or next day has gone up quite a bit. But they also got the cost to serve down. So the cost per unit of items delivered down. And that's the first time they've been able to improve that since 2018. So that's pretty significant as well, and definitely a major contributor to their profit improvement. He also talks a little bit about AI, of course, and obviously they have a huge commitment there, both to be applied to their consumer-facing businesses, but obviously as part of the offering from AWS. And then the last thing, and it's very hard for me to even describe this, so if people are interested, I would encourage them to go read it, because it's several pages of where he talks about this idea of primitive services. And it's kind of like the building blocks, like primitive iterations of component pieces of bigger ideas. But it kind of gets into this test and learn culture experimentation in a different way than I've heard really anybody talk about it, but particularly in the Amazon context. So I can't possibly, partially because I don't really completely understand it, but also because there's just a lot of detail and a lot of potential applications. So it's an interesting riff on new ways that they're thinking about accelerating the pace of disruption. All
right, well let's get on now. We've got I don't know, is this a whole new segment here? I don't know. Maybe we use something different. The wobbly department store corner. What are you thinking here? What's going on? We talk about department stores all the time, but what are you thinking?
Well, maybe we should have worked this out in rehearsal. There's a lot of news this week about department stores, which I'll get to quickly in a second. But yeah, we obviously talk a lot about how the department stores pretty much across the board are have been struggling, continue to struggle. So yeah, maybe it is a new segment. Hopefully some of these guys will do better and they won't fit within the segment. But yeah, a little bit of news on the department store front in the U.S. and overseas. The Macy's proxy fight, which we've talked about with Arc House, who are trying to see about doing a takeover of Macy's. They also were trying to get more power on the board of Macy's, and they ended up settling with Macy's, getting 2 new directors that they appointed to the Macy's board. And they will actually be working, these 2 directors will be working on the committee that is evaluating the takeover. So presumably...
Feels like a Trojan horse, no?
It's a good way to put pressure. I mean, basically, it's strong-arming their way to get closer to what they want. And I think Macy's decided that this was a good compromise. Now, I would assume that by having 2 Arc House appointed directors, particularly on this committee, that significantly increases the odds that a takeover bid might be accepted. But I guess we'll see how that plays out. But the takeover talks continue. I think we talked several weeks ago about how Macy's had agreed to engage in due diligence, active due diligence with them. So stay tuned. I expect we'll be hearing more about that in short order. Then other big American department store, JCPenney, and this got a ton. I have to credit their PR department because the amount of press this thing got, I think, was quite extraordinary. But JCPenney is opening their first new store in 8 years. Now, actually, I mean, technically it's a new store, but it's really a relocation from across the street, literally, to a Brookfield mall. Now, the reason that that's important is that Brookfield, as many people might know, and Simon Properties are the owners of JCPenney. So Penny's moved from across the street to a site in a mall in New Jersey that was an old Lord & Taylor, which has been shuttered for 4 years. And they significantly downsized the store. So it's only 65,000 square feet, which is much smaller than the average
that's small
Penny
for
store.
Yeah.
So some people, does this suggest a ton of confidence in JCPenney's over the long term? And I'm like, not to be negative about it, but I mean, I think it suggests that Brookfield is not anticipating that Penny's is going to shut down anytime in the next few years. But this is one of the higher volume stores of the Penny's chain, the one that it's being relocated, and it's going to a 65,000 square foot, which happens to be a much more releasable space than a 150,000 square foot store. Like, for example, you could see a Primark or a Dick's House of Sport or whatever. I think this is a little bit overplayed. It's been spun in the context of this $1 billion capital plan, which we've talked about a few times, is actually not a lot of money, particularly spent, given that Penny's had not spent a lot of money in the 5 years before that, and this is spread out over 2 or 3 years. So it's great that they're putting some investment. This is obviously a chance for them to showcase how they're thinking about a Penny's format going forward, should they choose to open any other new stores. But I would not expect that this suggests that somehow Penny's is going to be engaging in a significant ramp up of new stores.
We talked about Macy's. We talked about Penny. Now there's some work going on across the pond here over in Europe from America. Hudson's Bay is notionally involved. Talk about Galeria Karstadt Kaufhof.
Well, I'm not sure you pronounced that correctly, but some of our European listeners.
I'm close.
That's close. Well, I'm not even going to pretend to speak with good German accent or anything. But our European listeners will know that Galeria Karstadt Kaufhof, I believe, is one of the largest department store groups in Europe. It's actually the second largest. It is a merger several years ago between two of the biggest department store chains, and they are being bought out of bankruptcy by, as you pointed out, a group that includes the investment vehicle of Richard Baker, who is the guy behind Hudson Bay. So I don't know if Richard is a glutton for punishment by getting more deeply involved with the department store sector.
Yeah. It's not their first time in Europe. It's not his first time in Europe. He owned another one.
Well, ironically, they owned this part of this group several years ago. So, he sold it off and is now circling back at a lower price. So
he must like the real estate. You know how Baker operates. It's not really a retailer.
That's why I think, it's hard to tell whether this is really a opportunity to revitalize and give new life to this conglomerate, or whether it's a little bit of a hedge given the real estate. But probably the latter. But we'll see. We'll see what he does with it.
So as we've been doing all season, we're not doing like a dedicated how's it going vis-a-vis your predictions, but we do have some regular updates.
So the first part of this is from our friends at Rent the Runway. That's a brand we've talked about quite a lot in past episodes because they've had a very tough go of it for a while. Their stock is down something like 95%. Well, they got a warning from the stock exchange that they were going to get delisted because their stock had been trading under $1 for enough time that was in violation of the standards. Then they did a reverse stock split, which then allowed the stock to get to a higher price and avoid that. But the more interesting news is they just reported a tough quarter. Again, a little bit of improvement, but still pretty significant losses, pretty anemic sales growth. But they did give a very hopeful outlook about the future, saying that they expected sales growth to start back up again, that they were going to be cash positive going forward, that they were seeing some interesting applications of AI that they thought was really going to improve their performance going forward, and the stock really took off. So still way, way down from where it was a couple of years ago, but this may be, a company that is at least indicating that better days are ahead. So that's good news. On the other hand, we've, of course, talked about Allbirds multiple times and talked about how their stock has collapsed. Well, they are also now in the same situation that Rent the Runway was a couple weeks ago, that they may get delisted. So
now, what does that actually mean to a business like Allbirds? I mean, their stock is trading in not a penny stock, but it's below $1. So what does delisting actually mean on
I think you're no longer there. I believe on the NASDAQ, I think you're no longer traded on the NASDAQ. So it would go to basically the penny stock or, sort of private market. So it's a lot. What
does that mean to their capital structure, though? Like when you get delisted, they could probably find another stock market to list on. There's lots of little markets. What do you think it actually means to the? Is that the end of the business? They're gonna, the capital.
Well, it just makes it a lot harder for a broader set of investors to invest in the company. So that's not great from the standpoint of if you need to raise more capital or just want to, you have the stock be in a position for borrowing more money or whatever. So, and it's also just not good optics, I guess, more broadly. So
I get it.
It's not a good thing. I still think that Allbirds is likely to get acquired or go private in some sort of transaction here. Its market cap is below $100 million, so that's a pretty easy bite for both private equity as well as some larger companies.
If you want them, if there's a there.
Well, if you don't want to be catching the proverbial falling knife, but so we shall see there. And then it's not a brand we've talked about, or two brands we've not talked about very much, but Billy Reid, which is a very nice men's specialty store, high-end specialty store, which has been around for a while, acquired Not Standard, which is another one of these disruptor brands. I think they've got a few stores and have been nicely growing, but also I think having issues in terms of its capital structure and ability to sustain growth. So this is another strategic acquisition. So part of my prediction was either that these brands would the troubled brands would find themselves in a lot of trouble, like bankruptcy or perhaps even going away, or they would be bought up at fire sale prices. Now, we don't know the price that Billy Reid paid for Not Standard, but I'm sure it's well north of the unicorn valuation. Let's just put it that way.
All right. Well, that's a wrap on the news of the week. Just before we get to Home Depot's, talk about Home Depot's retail media network, Orange Apron. Let's hear from our presenting sponsor, Celonis. Want to ramp up speed and productivity for your entire retail operation? In the Celonis Process Mining for Dummies Handbook, we show you how Celonis process mining technology, enhanced with process intelligent AI, can help you streamline performance across your entire retail business so you can drive lasting value from end to end. That means purchasing, supply chain, omni-channel execution, merchandising, and customer service processes, all managed and optimized through one powerful software solution. To get your free copy of Process Mining for Dummies and see how it's generated millions in value for brands around the world like Aldi, Globus, and Edeka, head to Celonis.com/remarkable retail. Melanie, welcome to the Bambuser podcast studio here at Shop Talk in Vegas. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Fantastic. Now, this is actually your second time in Vegas in 2 weeks, so I guess you're a big fan of the... And in fact, you said it's your second time here at the same hotel.
Here at the same hotel, yeah.
Well, as we said, it's good to know your way around at least, right?
Yes, especially in this place like this. It's so big.
Yeah. One wrong turn and you're a long way from getting to where you were supposed to be going.
A couple thousand extra steps that you didn't plan on.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, that could interest you in some timeshare.
That's right.
Fair enough.
Exactly.
That's true.
That's how we're going to monetize the podcast, is selling timeshare.
That's
what do you think?
Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes.
I'm all about monetization. I'll take it.
Oh, that's right. That's a good thread to talk to you about. You're the right person.
I totally planned that.
That's right.
We did it in rehearsal. Well, listen, we're really thrilled you have the opportunity to sit down and chit-chat with us. We've had on the podcast before a couple of really great analysts talking about the world of retail media networks, but we're really excited to get a practitioner.
Oh, boy.
And really talk about, okay, how are you actually doing it? What are the kind of intricacies behind it? And we couldn't think of anybody better. So once again,
awesome.
Thanks. Why don't we start a little bit about yourself? Who are you and how did you get to be you and what do you do for a living?
Let's see. What do I do for a living? I run the Home Depot Retail Media Network, and I've been doing that since 2018. Launched the retail media practice then, and in the last year, I've taken it over full-time, my full-time responsibility. So at Home Depot, people have lots and lots of jobs, and I was one of those people. But we've grown the retail media practice to the point where it needed dedicated leadership.
Okay.
So I've been doing that for the last year. who am I? How did I get here?
Yeah, like what's your background?
My background.
Did you sometimes
Did
retail...
you always want to run a retail media network as a child?
I did. That was goals. 5th grade, you had to write that down. And that's what I put.
Yeah. Would you, or do you think of yourself, or did you want to always be in business, or and did you want to be in marketing and business, or did you want to work for a retailer that was orange, or like what? How did you get to where you
it's
are?
Really about orange. Which, by the way, what a great color. It's so fantastic to have an orange. I'm serious. It's so great. I started at the University of Michigan. I love Michigan. Go Blue. I was a kinesiology major because I was going to be a physical therapist. But that did not set well with me. I started... After graduate school, I started an interactive agency, which at the time was very new and very different.
Wow. Wait a minute. How did you make the leap from kinesiology to interactive? Was it just, hey, this thing could be big, and maybe kinesiology, I learned a lot of interesting stuff, but it's not for me?
My dad was like, you're flailing, and I just paid for Michigan, and so you're going to do something worthwhile. So he worked for General Motors, and IT was really growing in his area, and so he said, you need to go into IT. And so I went to a graduate program at Ball State University, and it was a 1-year intensive MBA in IT. Wow. And so there I learned all about the internet, and it was a really awesome opportunity for me because I thought of all the different ways that I could use that space. So I joined a friend who was starting an interactive agency, and we built a 20-person agency. And our primary customers were advertising agencies who had no idea what to do with this newfangled thing called the internet. Yeah. And so I spent a lot of time consulting and creating, which was really fun for me. But the thing that I found that I love the most is I really like starting new things. And so that was where I was really my happiest. And that's been a common thread throughout my entire career. Yeah. Always at the start of something new. Right. So I spent a lot of years in those interactive agencies. And I moved to Atlanta, and my first customer was the Home Depot. And so I worked with them on a variety of projects and got to know them as a company, as a culture, and that was really enjoyable. And then moved into another agency and started a social media program when no one knew what that was. And my first customer happened to be the Home Depot.
Home Depot.
And so, see a theme. So I ran Home Depot's very first social media program. And then spent years working alongside Home Depot in many different capacities. Then I jumped to a startup who's no longer a startup. Now they're a successful company. And that's where I learned data science is a massive part of the future of marketing. And so I was able to work closely with people who did a ton of data science to predict and to create probabilistic and deterministic modeling around customer behaviors. And I'm like, that is really cool. And then the Home Depot called me. And they said, hey, we've got this rule. We want someone to come in and build a social media practice for commerce. And that was actually not a common thing. There weren't even ads available from our social media platforms that were directed towards retail.
Interesting.
So I came on board and finally joined after many, many years of being a partner. To build a social commerce practice.
Wow. You've got incredible background because I see that art and science in you.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You get the science of the kinesiology, obviously, and then you've got this art of what you're doing, and then all the kind of analytics. So it's it's fascinating kind of trajectory. For those listeners who may not understand retail media networks or what it means, just, when you're in an elevator going to somewhere in this massive hotel and you have a few minutes to explain what it is. How do you explain retail media networks to the average business person?
I say that we take Home Depot's assets, specifically our website or our mobile app or our store, and we created a media company from it, which means that we place advertisements from our suppliers in front of our customers who are making decisions about their homes, or our pro customers are making decisions about their business. And it helps better connect our suppliers to those customers at the point of decision.
And can you give us a little sense of so you said 2018 was when you got started in this space. So that was pretty early, I think, in at least for the kind of traditional legacy sort of retailers. What motivated the beginnings of it? And just maybe give us a little color around the evolution of it over the last, I guess it's almost 6 years now, right?
It's very much on theme and on brand with my career. I was running a social media team, and I saw an opportunity for me to increase my media budgets by offering our suppliers the ability to buy retargeting ads. So I worked very closely with one of our media partners and with a technology company, and I built a portal, and I brought in 10 suppliers, and I said, will you go inside of this portal and see if you are interested in buying retargeting ads for your product pages? And they came in, they were great partners, and they were like, yes, we would love to do this. Because, of course, retargeting is the lowest of the low on the performance marketing channel. And they were going after customers, and they were already highly interested, already at Home Depot. They just hadn't converted. And so they were very interested in that. And so we built a whole platform from scratch to offer retargeting ads to our suppliers.
I think now as we talk about why there's so much interest in retail media networks, the stuff that's really emerged in the last year or two, you hear a lot of discussion about kind of like, let's find new ways to make, I'm dumbing it down a little bit, but it sometimes feels like, well, we got to find new ways to make money. This is a new thing that's been enabled by technology and other successful models. It's not so much, I don't hear people talking about so much as like, we were working with our vendors, we saw a need, we responded to the need, and now it's just evolved into other things. It's a really interesting path, I think.
I've always said that our retail media program it's a supplier stickiness program. We want our suppliers to pick Home Depot every day. And when they pick us, that means that they give us their best product, the best available quantity, the inventories, retails. They give us their time. They invest in our foundation. They are a true partner to us. And so I always am thinking about their experience as someone who bought media for the Home Depot for many years. It was another one of my jobs as I ran our media team. How do I enable and make the supplier's life a little bit easier at Home Depot? And how do we drive their success? Because their success is ours. So the retail media program has always been around what do our suppliers need and how do we get them access and closer to the customer where maybe it didn't exist before. So for me, I always talk about retail, always talk about the last mile delivery. And it's the most expensive part of delivery, right? How do you get that product to the customer? I think retail media is the last mile of media, right? So
That's
before...
great.
I like that.
That's a great way.
Do you like
we may
that
have
one?
a title for the episode.
So to me, it's like the last mile of media, right?
Yeah.
So you're finally at that point with the customer is they've declared they're in the project, they're solving a problem in their home, or they're solving a problem for their business, our pro customer. I'm making a decision. And so retail media opens up the opportunity for a supplier to be right there. Before, it was more of like an influence, and now it's really specific, and it's based on the supplier's business goals and growth goals within Home Depot.
Yeah, so that's sort of interesting. Well, I think it's extremely interesting. I don't know if this is a useless tangent we can cut out, but
fine.
But one of the things Michael and I have been talking about actually for several months, somewhat on the podcast, but usually on the side, about we hear retailers talk about being customer focused or customer obsessed, and we're kind of like, well, did you just discover this? But I think part of what's going on, and maybe this is a distinction between the way you guys have at least thought about it originally, is you hear plenty of companies talk about retail media network. It's like, well, let's just try to find new ways to make money. Maybe because our core business isn't performing that. I mean, maybe a little cynical about it. But sometimes like, well, we haven't figured out how to sell the main stuff we have at a good margin. Here's another way of making some more money, just leveraging the traffic we already have. I don't hear them talking about so much as we're coming at it from our, and I want to talk to you about consumers in a second,
of course.
But coming at it from the customer focus. Now, that's not to say you're not making money from it or don't want to make money from it, but it's a really different lens in terms of addressing a problem or opportunity.
So the Home Depot business is a very healthy business and has great margins with or without the retail media team.
Right. So you're not doing it out of desperation.
We are not we're not doing it out of desperation or necessity. We are a service to our suppliers and another marketing arm or an extension of Home Depot. We're here to serve the health of Home Depot, and when Home Depot is healthy, the customer experience is healthy, the pro experience is healthy, and the supplier experience is healthy. And that's really what we believe our role is.
No, that's super interesting.
We are a P&L, and I'm not trying to say that we're not. but it is not our primary mission.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a very helpful distinction. So let's talk a little bit about the consumer side of this. And I'm just going to say one of my worries about retail media networks is and maybe it's not so much an issue for you. You can tell me. But as I think about these other companies that seem to be chasing easy, maybe not so easy, but what might be seemingly easy dollars, and sort of wedging in ads. How do you trade off the chase for the monetization of the traffic against what the consumer, is there to do in the first place? And I always use this joke. It's like if I walked into a restaurant, somebody might jump out and say, "Do you want some insurance?" And people go, "Well, that's clearly too intrusive."
Yeah, right.
But
it's misplaced.
Yes, but you can imagine, how taken to the limits as you chased the retail media opportunity, you start to denigrate the consumer experience. So I guess, do you see that as a real concern? But I guess more importantly, like, how do you think through how you're developing the retail media networks in terms of how it fits into the consumer or the pro experience?
First of all, I don't think we're there yet with our network. I have a very close relationship with our online team, our HomeDepot.com team, and their primary concern is the customer experience.
Yeah.
And so when we partner with them, and their goals are on my goal sheet, and my goals are on their goal sheet, by the way. That's how integrated we are. We both care very much about that customer experience because we don't want to harm the core business.
Yeah.
So when you harm the core business, now all of a sudden you're
tail wagging the dog.
Tail wagging the dog. You're harming Home Depot, and you don't want to do that. But we're definitely not there yet in the saturation of our business, to be honest with you. And so I do think we have a lot of opportunity to test in and learn around what ad experiences we can explore and add to our network that would not be intrusive to the customer experience. But the customer experience is, frankly, the first thing we start with, because our company requires that. Yeah. It's very, very focused, very much on the customer experience, and has been forever.
Sure.
So it's a part of our ethos. Not to say that we don't get it right every single time.
Sure.
But I think it's probably one of our most opinionated conversations is, does this disrupt the customer experience?
Right, yeah.
And so we go from our feelings and our history of what we think is right to the data. And so we have these very healthy conversations around that.
I mean, my experience of the Home Depot has always been the touchstone, has always been that consumer experience, very grounded, very grounded retail, sophisticated, but very grounded retail organization. Let's talk about organizations. So we're kind of curious about how the retail media network is structured from a team perspective, because there's lots of, if you're a vendor, you've got lots of opportunities to participate in all kinds of different programs. Sometimes historically, whether it's Home Depot or other organizations, they're owned by the merchants or sometimes the marketers or sometimes other. How do you structure the retail media network's team?
So first of all, we live in the marketing organization.
Okay.
We were born out of the marketing organization, and we live in the marketing organization, and we love that. We want to stay there. Our retail media network is focused on and grown on the idea of service, which is, again, very much aligned to the Home Depot values, right? Frankly, on our aprons, it says we put customers first, and it's all based on service. Yep. And so the way that we have structured retail media at Home Depot is that we have built really deep account teams that serve as the primary point of contact for that supplier outside of merchandising. So they call us, we support them, and we work very closely in partnership with our merchant teams. And I will tell you, it wasn't always that way.
Does the merchant do the first call?
No, we do.
You guys do?
Yes.
Okay.
Even in the early days, we did the first call. We didn't want to put this burden on the merchants. That's not fair. Our merchants work really, really hard and have a massive job. Knowing and understanding media is not that. But
they own they would say they own the relationship with the vendors, right?
They sure do. And so what we've done is we've elevated the relationship where it's the supplier salesperson and the supplier marketing person. And now both of those people feel like they've got their counterpart at Home Depot who's very much focused on their success.
Nice.
And so we've made a huge effort. Like I said, at the beginning, we didn't make a huge effort. We were like, we're charging forward and we're going to build this retail media business. And about a year or two ago, we were like, this is ridiculous. We are one company. We need alignment and we need support. And so we've very much turned inward and said, how do we partner better together to drive adoption of retail media? And when it's working when. Our merchants will, they have a really cool development program, and they change positions every few years to increase their own skill sets. Yeah. And what we're seeing is the first person they're calling is retail media to say, can you give me a rundown of my suppliers and how they participate with retail media? That's amazing. And so, that's like one of those clues that the partnership is working very well.
It's a cultural clue, right?
It's a cultural clue. Yeah. So no, we are very clear that this is not your responsibility. We are here to inform you. If you want to participate, we would love that. If you want to help us in any way, we're here, but this is not your job. Right. And so some people are like, awesome, and they're out, and others are leaned in because they're curious, and they think that it's a competitive advantage.
And how do you scale that? We've talked to other retailers and experts who say, listen, I only really get to talk to the top 10 suppliers. I don't have the bandwidth, but it feels like you're scaling that better than most people. Like the small, I don't know how many vendors Home Depot would have, but it would be many.
You have a lot.
You got a lot, and you probably got small, mid, and large.
Medium.
Yeah. So how do you scale that opportunity so they can participate in this great stuff too?
Yeah. So we built a account management team first, and if going into retail media, if your top suppliers were unhappy, everyone would know. Right. So we knew that we had to take care of them, and we built account management teams just like an agency team. I have a big agency background, and a lot of people on my team have big agency backgrounds, so we knew how to structure account teams appropriately. So we have what's called the vendor partner management team, and they are account teams, and they work with our top 50 suppliers. So we have a very structured way that we take care of them. Account management, analytics, measurement, media teams that all support those top guys. And yes, they spend a lot of money.
Yeah, fairly conventional structure, basically.
Yes, right. And everything's managed service, everything's a white glove service. And the best thing that we do, I think, through that team is we make sure that supplier is connected to the Home Depot strategy and the department that they serve. Because remember, the marketing team may not be in the sales team, and they'll be disconnected from those two things. So we make sure that they feel really connected back to the Home Depot, and that their strategy is driving the Home Depot strategy, which is nice. Yeah. So that's their job. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of alpha, beta partnership tests. So they're our best partners in growing our retail media network. So we spend a lot of time with them. Then we have another category of suppliers who get an aproned help. So apron, all of our store associates wear aprons. We do too. And so they get that apron help, but it may not be at the same depth as maybe those top tier. Okay. And that's another larger section. And then we have a lot of self-serve tools that come with apron support. Okay. Whether that's through a webinar or through a call center, we have structured help at every level. Right. So yes, if you're a small supplier and you're spending a few dollars, you don't get the managed service, but you still have an apron support in some capacity to help you through and help you understand the media buying process.
Super interesting. So we're here at Shop Talk. I think everybody's leaving Shop Talk right now because you hear jets nonstop over our heads during this. I've never heard so many airplanes. But you just arrived, and you're on the stage tomorrow. Now, this episode will come out in a couple of weeks. What do you? Can you give us a teaser that will not be released outside of the podcast studio here? What are you going to be talking about? What do you hear about?
Monetization of retail data. So while I was building the Retail Media Network, my primary job was running our media side of our business, the integrated media team. And I built our audience practice. So how did we use our first-party data in a way to be able to target customers with personalized ads? So I built an entire practice around that. Not I, Melanie. I was part of the team.
The Royal You.
The Royal You. Really fantastic team. So we were able to really look at our data and say, this is a major asset to our business. And we started this project in 2016. And so how do we think about our customer and what they need from us and the time that they need it? And changed our entire marketing strategy to be based on our customer events and less around maybe our events that we thought were important in the customer's lives. So for instance, you're in a bathroom project. We have a bath event in August. That's when you would receive bath ads. In August.
Because everybody does their bathroom renovations in August.
They do.
Right. That's so convenient.
They do. But really, bath is a very consistent business. It's consistent all year round. Why? Because anyone could be in a bathroom project at any time. But the real hard thing to do is to identify a customer in a project, because there's no demographic, psychographic type of data that says you're in a project or not. You just have to tell me, I'm on a project. I'm like, oh, you are? Tell me about that. It's a dinner conversation, right?
Right.
And so we had to really leverage our data to say, we believe these people right here in a bathroom project, and we believe that these people are just buying a faucet. It's a very different project. Both projects, but very different. And the consideration and the content is very different. So we built this entire audience strategy based on customers who were in particular projects, pros by trade, and customers who are just buying items for their home. And then built this whole content strategy around it. And that was the foundation of retail media, to be honest with you. It's like, if we could figure this out, and it was really super hard, then we know our suppliers have the same challenges that we have on trying to find who's in a bath project, right? They don't. They're not buying that data elsewhere.
No.
And so it really became the foundation of, we can monetize our data as a part of the retail media network. And so tomorrow I'm going to talk about monetization of assets at the Home Depot.
Nice. Well, it's been, it seems like a pretty incredible journey in a relatively short amount of time. We're coming up on our time, but before we let you go, can you maybe just give us a sense of both where Home Depot is going with retail media networks, and maybe just a little bit about what you're doing or not doing in stores, because I think most of this is a little bit more, online, e-commerce centered, but just generally, for people in the audience who might be thinking about starting a retail media network, or maybe they're early in and maybe want to accelerate their journey based upon some of the things. Any kind of tips or recommendations for accelerating your journey?
Well, one of the things that we did early on is we built both our on-site capabilities and our off-site capabilities. So our media partners like Meta and Pinterest and Google, they were with us very early in this journey, and that helped us a lot build our off-site capabilities, because a lot of the time a supplier wants to also bring traffic back to the store and use those first-party audiences really effectively. I think a lot of the times we focus heavily on on-site, because that's a more margin-based business.
Right.
And you kind of forget that offsite is part of the whole plan, right? So you should build both at the same time. And not all retail media networks start that way, because they are very different businesses and complex. So that'd be my first tip.
Okay.
Store. I cannot believe that we would never do anything in our store. We have 2,300 stores, and the majority of our sales happen at that store.
Sure.
And they happen with a phone in their hand as they complete that project or that research project that they started on our site.
Right.
They end up in the store 90% of the time to complete that transaction, because everything you do in your home is new to you. Even if you've done it before, it's been a while since you've done it. So the store becomes a really interesting asset that we have, and the people in the store, become a really interesting part of the retail media network. So we've tested several screen concepts in our store. I think there's so much more to do in the store that we haven't even thought about.
Yeah.
We don't have coolers. We don't have really easy aisles. We're a working warehouse. If you go into a Home Depot, you will have a forklift in your experience. And I don't think if you go to the grocery store, you see a lot of forklifts, but we do so we've got a very challenging and unique store situation and environment, but it's something I think that we need to do. It's kind of a greenfield space.
Sure,
it's really exciting for us, actually, to figure that out.
Yeah, it seems like,
But it's a little bit like...
How high is up, right?
Yeah, how high is up, but it's also like... we have to work within the confines of the store, which means the associates and the experience, the customer experience. Talk about customer experience considerations.
Yeah.
Wow. It's actually even more difficult than the site itself.
Have you thought about network monitors on the tow motors, on the forklifts? Anyway, there's a throwaway idea.
You're like, that's it.
Thanks.
Do what you want with that, but,
So I do
that's
think
a free idea, and it's worth what you pay for it.
Free idea. I do just think there's a lot of opportunity in that space, and there's just we're ripe for innovation there.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
Well, Melanie, welcome back. This is kind of a double-click episode or interview for us. We're talking to you now, I think, in your offices in Atlanta. Is that where I'm finding you today? We're finding you today?
Yes, that is where we are.
Well, we were talking off mic, you've had a very busy couple of weeks after we saw you at Shop Talk, and we were just on the cusp, but you were just on the cusp of some very big news, and we decided that we'd talk to you after the big news so you can tell us and tell the listeners how it went. So what's the big news? What happened after you left Vegas and Shop Talk?
We had a few big announcements. The first is we hosted our first inaugural In-Fronts, which was our take on a retail media upfront or new front. And so that was a big event that happened 2 weeks ago at our Home Depot corporate offices in Atlanta. We had about 500 attendees, both virtually and in person. But at that event, we announced that we have rebranded ourselves from Retail Media Plus to Orange Apron Media. And we felt like it was the time to do that as we think about where we're going as a retail media network and who we feel we represent, and the service mentality that we want to bring forth to all of our suppliers. So it was a really big day for us, not only hosting this inaugural event, but having the rebrand announced there. It was a very fun day.
And what was the impetus for making such a big move at this time?
Mm-hmm. Well, I spent last summer thinking about how do we differentiate ourselves in the market? There are lots of retail media networks out there. I think a lot of them promise similar things. We promise those same things too, right? Access to customers, advertising on our owned properties, advertising in our store. So how do we differentiate ourselves in a sea of, I think, very strong retail media networks as well as new ones coming into the market? And we went through, it was a pretty rigorous exercise. It took us a couple of months to go through the process of thinking about our differentiation in the market, what we stand for, what are our brand ethos, what are our brand values as an entity within the Home Depot, and how does that tie back to the Home Depot's values and Home Depot strategy. And it just came to a point where I said to the team, I'm like, I feel like we need a new name. I feel like we've gotten to a point where we need to rethink who we are, and our name needs to reflect what that is. Everyone voted yes. There was not a person in the room that said, I think we should keep our name. The name Retail Media Plus was something we came up with back in 2018. And it was a way for us to describe to our internal leaders and partners about what we were doing. And it was a great name. It made a lot of sense. It really helped everyone kind of get on board with what we were doing. But now that we think about ourselves as a more of an outward-facing team, what should we be called? And so we went through a lot of different names, a lot of different name items. Being in a company that represents action around how to, there are lots and lots of different action verbs that we could have used, like workshop or warehouse or build. But the word orange was always on the board. Like, this is an iconic color. When people see the color orange, they have a high, like 97% brand awareness of orange to the Home Depot.
Yeah.
So we always loved that color, and it was kind of always like on the board. And one of our big key differentiators is service. And we really want to be a true partner to our suppliers to drive their business successfully. And service is a big part of that. Yes, automation, yes, tools and self-service is a part of service. But when we think about service holistically, it includes all of those things, including the people. And so what is the ultimate representation of the word service at the Home Depot? And that's the orange apron that our store associates wear every day in the store.
Sure.
So, you come into our store, you find someone with an orange apron on, and they're going to help you, right? That's an automatic association to the word service. So we always had the word apron up there as almost like guiding words. Hey, let's brainstorm. Let's have these guiding words, orange and apron. And we were like, or those could be the words, right? Orange and apron. So we just didn't love anything as much as we loved those words. And so this was a 6-month process. It was not something we took lightly. And we loved those 2 words. We felt like it connected back to the Home Depot brand, which was very important to us. We did not want something that was independent of the Home Depot. Because again, we feel like we're just another marketing arm to the Home Depot. We're here to make Home Depot successful. And Orange does that. Apron is something we all feel so connected to. And it really spoke to the team, just to be honest with you, that Apron word. And it speaks to our suppliers too.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, as soon as I heard it, I was like, this is genius. Sample of one, but I vote for, I love it. So it's,
I like that sample of one. Thank you.
Well, and then not specifically about the name, but I'm curious, this whole idea, as the other thing I just loved, this upfront iteration that you did. I'm curious, how did that go? And what was the reaction or any insights you got back from either folks on the Home Depot side as it happened and you went back and looked at it, but I guess more from the audience?
Yeah, let me tell you something. It's significantly better than I thought it was going to. And not because I didn't think it was going to go well. I think it was going to be a nice meeting. And it really turned out to be an industry event. Because we invited not only our suppliers, but we have a lot of media partners who are on this journey with us. And so we invited all of our media partners. We invited our agency partners who support us. And it was really an event for all of them. It was celebratory with our progress and future looking into where we're going. And of course, with a lot of new announcements, but also a connection back to the Home Depot marketing leadership team as well. And so the event to me just was, like I said, better than I could have ever expected, because I think the content was not only resonates with the suppliers, but it informed them and it made them feel much more connected and closer to the Home Depot, which was my intent. I have an overwhelmingly positive reaction, not only in just the feedback I got on that day, but just this week, I had a call with someone who attended, and at the end of the call, he was like, I just want to tell you something. That Inference event was just amazing, and it totally exceeded our expectations. So really outstanding feedback. I just can't thank my team enough for what they did to bring this to life. And frankly, I think we introduced a lot of new opportunities and concepts that the suppliers they really want to lean into, or they want to be beta partners or test partners with some of our roadmap items. So all in all, just extremely positive on all fronts.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, it's a new phase of the journey, right? You've been on this journey for a while, and it's a big new phase. And you're right. It was time. It felt like for the industry, it was kind of time, and then clearly it was the right time and the right place and the right everything for Home Depot. And
you have to think about, I don't know if we've said, as I said on our last conversation, but a retail media network is a very different media channel for a supplier than a traditional media channel.
And an agency, right? I'm sure there are agency folks in the room as well, right? So,
absolutely.
My experience in an upfront is full of agency folks who are looking to figure out how they're going to divide their clients' money. And that's got to be an important audience for you in the future. Yeah.
It is. Oh, very much important audience. And we had agency partners in attendance, but I think it's an even bigger audience and opportunity for us as we grow. But when you think about it, you've got a supplier who not only is interested in driving great media performance, and that's what they expect out of a media channel, right? They also want, and on a retail media network, is that they've already picked that retailer to sell their product. So it's like a full circle relationship. It's not one way where I buy media and expect great media outcomes or KPIs related to that media buy, which is fantastic. We do that every day too. But it's also multi-sided, multi-dimensional, where they sell their products there and they introduce new innovation or they connect with customers in different ways. So to me, the inference was about bringing our suppliers inside of the Home Depot to look at their business in a 360-degree mode. Oh, I'm going to connect with leaders that I don't maybe speak to every day because they impact my business. I'm learning about new marketing opportunities, maybe through sports marketing that I didn't know about, that helps me drive my connection to a new customer.
Oh,
our CEO was there, and he talked about the strategy of Home Depot and the growth journey we're on, because suppliers want to know that they've picked the right partner, right? Yeah. And then there's the media side and retail media business. So it's really, like I said, a full circle moment for them. And it was a really great opportunity to bring all of that to them and not just talk about new products that we're bringing to life inside of retail media. And Orange Apron brings new products to life. Like that's what we do.
Yeah.
But we want to give the supplier marketing teams that full vision of who they're partnering with over a long horizon of time. And the fact that they've picked the right partner in Home Depot.
Remember that idea I pitched to you at Vegas that you'd put media panels on the forklifts. I hope you launch that at the inside. Maybe you didn't have time. Maybe it's for next year.
Some rapid prototyping going on as we speak.
That's right.
You got the duct tape working hard, attaching to the motor. Wait, Melanie, thanks again for taking the time. Very generous of you to jump back on the mic with us. Now, if people want to learn more, people being suppliers or vendors or anyone interested in kind of retail media from a real expert, where should they go to learn more and to get in touch?
They can always go to orangeapronmedia.com.
Oh, fantastic! And are you a LinkedIn person? Do you follow LinkedIn? Is that a good way?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yep. And then there's LinkedIn. Frankly, we have a showcase page on LinkedIn as well, and that's LinkedIn. It's home-depot-orange-apron-media. So there's also a great way to be able to connect with us about all the latest happenings and also get in touch with us that way as well.
All right. Well, we'll throw all those links and all that dashing into the show notes.
Lots of dashing. Yes.
So, Melanie, thanks for joining Steve and I again back on the mic and here at the Remarkable Retail Podcast, and wish you continued success. Look forward to checking in with you as this goes, because it's a real great example of how things get done. So, thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. New episodes of Season 8 presented by Celonis will show up every Tuesday, so be sure to tell your friends and colleagues in the retail industry all about us.
I'm Steve Dennis, author of the best-selling book Remarkable Retail and my new forthcoming book, Leaders Leap, Transforming Your Company at the Speed of Disruption, which will be published in April and is available for pre-order at booksellers everywhere. You can learn more about me, my consulting, and keynote speaking at stephenpdennis.com.
I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer retail growth consultant, keynote speaker, producer, and host of a series of retail trade podcasts, including this one. You can learn more about me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.